Welcome to Harmonized. I am your host, Gigi Naval, integrative and functional registered dietitian nutritionist, here to help you harmonize your gut and hormone health for improved metabolic health. Welcome back to Harmonized. Do you have a friend that can eat a huge bowl of pasta with a good amount of protein in there and some fat, and their blood sugars do not spike beyond 140 milligrams per deciliter, while on the other hand, you eat the same amount of pasta, a large bowl of pasta, and it has the same amount of protein and fat, but yet your blood sugars just shoot up into the heavens, and you are just so baffled. What on earth? Okay, so when this happens, stop and ponder. Is my AMY1 gene mismatched with my meal patterns? Okay, you might be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? Well, the AMY1 gene is very important, and it is an overlooked gene that is so important for our metabolic health. It is part of the metabolic puzzle. It is a huge piece that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, it can make or break our metabolic health. Okay, so here's the thing. When it comes to this AMY1 gene, this actually stands for amylase alpha 1 gene. And this is what produces our salivary amylase. Salivary amylase is an enzyme that helps break down complex carbohydrates in our mouths. And complex carbohydrates are things like grains, legumes, beans, fruits. It starts to break that down in our mouths and it converts it to simple carbohydrates. Okay. So here's the thing. Back to your friend. Your friend can eat that bowl of pasta and feel amazing and energized. And then you eat the same thing and you're wondering why you feel bloated, you're tired, you're struggling with weight loss. And well, yes, the answer could be in our mouths, literally in our mouths, what I'm talking about, this AMY1 gene. And you're like, what in the world? What are you talking about? Okay, so yes, we've been told for many years that digestion begins in our mouths. Yes, it does. And we usually think when we start chewing our food, that's when digestion begins. Actually, digestion begins with the cephalic phase, meaning when we look at food, when we prepare food, when we're smelling food, that starts the digestive process of starting to produce more saliva, etc. However, actually, then it is not just chewing our food that starts the digestive process because it coats, because we are producing more saliva and the saliva is coating the food that we eat. And so then the enzymes in the saliva gets in contact with the food. It's not because we're chewing, but it's because the saliva, which contains the amylase, gets in contact right away. Even before we start chewing our food, this amylase starts getting to work. Okay, and so it starts breaking down the carbohydrates even before the carbohydrates get to our stomachs, where it goes through further digestion, breaking down, absorption, that type of thing. Okay, now here's the thing with the AMY1 gene. This particular gene is actually considered a copy number variation. So what does that mean? Well, other genes have two copies, okay? We have two copies of this one gene, one from each parent. But AMY1 is considered copy number variation. So we could actually have, because of the variation, we can actually have way more copies than what the regular number of genes is. And then we can have too little also. So you could think of it this way. When people have the A allele, it means that they have a low copy number of this amylase gene. So they're not producing as much amylase. And then when someone has the T allele, this means that, they have a large number of this particular AM1 gene, so they have a high copy number. So you could think of it this way. You could think of each of us having a factory in our body. And so if we have an AMY1 gene variation with the T gene variation, so a T from each parent, that individual then has this factory with a lot of workers that is efficiently producing a lot of amylase. So this person can just break down starch so efficiently. Doesn't matter really how much they eat. Because their bodies is so efficient because of this TT gene variation of AMY1. Now, someone who has the AA gene variation of the AMY1 gene, so they have fewer copy number of this particular gene. So that means they don't have as many workers. And so that because they don't have as many workers, they're not producing as much amylase. So then this person is not able to break down the carbohydrates from the food that they're eating as well as can be. And so there's that to deal with. So the carbohydrates is not being broken down and absorbed as well. So you can only imagine that then there are issues that can happen. And I'll go back to that in a second. But then there's another gene variation, which is called AT. So one of the A, which is the one that has less of this gene, okay, less of the copy number, and then one A and then one T. So yeah, they have that, which means, okay, they are able to also produce a little bit more because they have a little bit more copies, but it's a combination. So this person is right in the middle. They're not really producing too little, but they're not producing as much as someone who has the TT gene variation. So there are considerations that we need to keep in mind here. So I'm going to go back to the AA variation. Again, it means that the person is not producing as much salivary amylase. So whenever this person eats starch, it doesn't get broken down effectively in the mouth. And so it arrives in the small intestines pretty much largely intact. And so this puts more burden on the pancreas. And the pancreas will have to produce more insulin. And because the starch isn't pre-digested, you might actually see delayed but sustained glucose spikes, or conversely, poor absorption. And this actually leads to the feeling of being tired, feeling fatigued. Okay. And with the TT variation, yes, these people are like just producing a lot of the enzyme. And so this person is a starch digesting machine. They can eat a bowl of quinoa or rice, and the saliva just breaks it. Their saliva breaks it down immediately. So these individuals have actually a better glycemic control with carbohydrates, and they're less prone to having insulin resistance, even consuming a high starch diet. Now, the AT, which I mentioned, it's half and half. It's a hybrid. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's like middle of the road, moderate, producing moderate amounts. So, yeah, this person can handle some starch, but there is a tipping point, and that's me. That's what I have. So then we need to ask, how does this affect our gut health and our hormone health? Well, here's the deal. Undigested starch can then become a feast for the bacteria that is in our body, in our gut. And this can cause fermentation to happen. And so this can lead to bloating, gas, and this can lead to an imbalanced gut community called dysbiosis. And this can even mimic or exacerbate SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So how does this affect our hormone health? Well, when the gut is stressed, inflammation is increased, then this then can lead to having leaky gut, and then toxins get out from the gut into our bloodstream. And so this causes systemic inflammation. And when we have systemic inflammation going throughout our body, this can elevate cortisol levels. And when cortisol levels are high, this makes our body produce more insulin and makes the risk of having insulin resistance become more prominent. It increases our risk for insulin resistance, and then this will affect our sex hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. So it has a domino effect. Could you imagine just with this one gene variation of AMY1? Okay, so then I need to speak with lots of love and concern to my friends who are vegetarians and vegans. So, if you have a gene variation of AMY1 and you have the AA or the AT variations, then this can be really tricky. A traditional vegetarian and vegan meal pattern is traditionally, yes, high in starch. And so you rely on legumes, on grains, oats, beans, tubers. And those are all really good foods, but they are high in starch. But here is the mismatch. If you have the AA variation, this is a genetic mismatch. And so it is a genetic mismatch between your biology and how God designed you and what you eat. So you simply don't have the enzymatic machinery to process the sheer amount of starch that you have taken in. Okay. And so I see these types of clients in my practice, and they think, well, switching to a vegan diet is healthy, but then there are some who actually gain weight and who get bloated, and it's because of what I have been explaining. Maybe it is a mismatch with their AMY1 gene variation. And so this could be very confusing because you're thinking, but I'm eating healthy. Okay, so in reality, if you have an AA genotype, so that healthy bowl of lentils and brown rice, it is actually a metabolic stressor for you. And your body cannot access the fuel efficiently. And so you feel tired because cellularly, you're being starved. You're not getting the nutrients to where you want it to be. You're not getting the glucose adequately into your cells. And so at the same time, this can spike inflammation from the gut fermentation. So the enzyme factor here is, well, I'll just take some digestive enzymes. Well, here's the thing. For an AA vegetarian, a supplement might not be enough. Okay, so that is something to really keep in mind and consider. Whether you have the AA genotype or even the AT genotype. And so what should you do? It's going to be extremely important to take your time to chew your food, because then you are working on producing more saliva. The more you chew, the more you are producing saliva. The more saliva, then the more you're trying to get out as much amylase that you possibly can with the few amounts that you actually produce. So that is going to be very helpful. That is an imperative place to start. Okay. And then it will be very important then to monitor your portion sizes of the foods that are very high and rich in starch. So that's one thing. Okay. Chew your food really well. And then the second thing is to control your portions, not eat that full whole bowl of pasta, but you might really want to just really modify how much of the high starch, high carbohydrate foods you are consuming. And then a third thing that you could do is when it comes to rice, to pasta, and potatoes, after you cook it, put it in the fridge. Let it be in the fridge overnight, because then this changes the chemical structure, so that now the potato, the pasta, the rice has now become a resistant starch. And when it is a resistant starch, it does not allow blood sugars to spike as high. Of course, it will still let blood sugars rise, but it won't spike it as high. But it doesn't mean you can eat as much as you want either, but at least it will help with that rise. Okay. So if you need further help with this, that is so important to get the personalized help that you need. In my program, the Gut and Hormone Harmonizer, I have 3 versions of my program. And the third version, which is called Fusion 2, actually includes the Nutrigenetic test. And so this includes other nutrition-related gene variations that will be very helpful to know. But I'll be more than happy to work with you on this and to guide you, because once you have this knowledge, then you will be able to know what else you could do to beat this, so that you can help your gut health, your hormone health, and so that your metabolic health will be optimized. Okay, friend. In all that we do, in all that we eat and drink, let us do it all for the glory of God.